let me tell you something most people won't. Nobody really wants to hear your problems. They'll nod politely, maybe offer a hang in there. But in their heads, they're thinking about chicken soup mortgage payments or why your story sounds suspiciously like a rerun. We live in a world drunk on noise group chats, therapy memes, toxic positivity, and podcasts that teach you how to manifest healing while drinking green sludge. Everyone's talking and talking and oversharing, but you're drowning. In advice, in pity, in the sound of your own suffering, being played back at you through 30 comment threads. Here's a truth wrapped in silk and salt. Every time you retell your pain, you rebleed the wound. And worse, you give other people the knife. Now, I'm not saying stay silent forever. That's for monks, spies, and men who forgot their wife's birthday. But what if, just what if, silence wasn't weakness, but a sacred act of self-respect? Today, we're going to explore why oversharing might be the very thing keeping you stuck, why Buddhism calls silence a superpower, and why in old age, the strongest people are often the ones who say the least and smile the most. Because sometimes healing doesn't start with a conversation. It starts when you finally shut the hell up. Let's begin. Part 1. Noise is the new addiction, and you're the dealer. You ever notice how some people can't sit in silence for more than 5 seconds without exploding into a weather report, a grandchild update, or an unsolicited story about their gallbladder? It's not their fault really, they're addicts, but not to drugs or wine or bingo. They're addicted to noise, and worse, they're out here dealing it to everyone else like it's candy at a senior potluck. We used to be bored in peace. Now, we're overstimulated in misery. From the moment you wake up, your brain is force-fed a buffet of beeps, breaking news, and motivational memes with sunsets behind them. Then come the group chats. Margaret's hip exploded again. Your daughter's ex-husband just got baptized in Arizona. Look at this dog that looks like Brad Pitt. And let's not forget the main course, the daily habit of telling everyone how hard your life is. Here's the punchline no one's laughing at. Your brain gets high off the drama. Neuroscientists call it emotional reinforcement. Every time you vent your frustration, you light up the same neural circuits, and those circuits get stronger. You're not venting, you're rehearsing despair. Now Buddhism being a lot older and a bit funnier than neuroscience put it, more poetically. Your mind is like a wild monkey. Stop feeding it bananas dipped in gasoline. Silence isn't punishment, it's detox. Elderly psychology backs this up. Studies show older adults who talk less about their chronic stress actually recover faster. Why? Because they conserve emotional energy instead of scattering it like birdseed at a funeral. Think about it. If your mouth is constantly running, your mind never has time to walk. So before you tell your neighbor that your knees are aching and your son forgot your birthday again, take a breath, sit with the ache. Let the silence rub the sting out. Because the real addiction isn't pain. It's the performance of pain. And trust me, the audience is already scrolling. Part 2. Everyone's listening, but no one cares, and that's the good news. Here's a truth that stings worse than your ex's birthday card from 1994. Most people are only half listening to your problems. The other half of their brain is planning dinner, judging your outfit, or wondering if you're about to ask for money. And honestly, that might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Because once you realize nobody really cares, you're finally free to stop performing like a tragic actor in your own opera. Your suffering is valid, but their attention span, not so much. Now, don't get me wrong. People mean well. Your sister might tilt her head and say, "Oh, honey," like she's about to nominate you for sainthood. But behind her sympathetic eyes is a mental grocery list. Eggs, milk, toilet paper, earplugs. Here's the Buddhist view on it. He who seeks sympathy is thirsty in the desert, asking for rain from another mirage. You think you're being understood, but more often you're just being politely tolerated. Elderly psychology calls this compassion fatigue. After 60, most people have their own battles: health scares, loneliness, joint pain. Adult children who only call when the printer's broken. They're running on low bandwidth, so what happens when you add your storm to their forecast? They emotionally short-circuit. They might nod, offer bad advice. Or worse, they might tell you about their hemorrhoids. Congratulations, you've started a competition nobody wants to win. There's freedom in this realization. If people don't have the capacity to carry your pain, then maybe you were never supposed to hand it to them in the first place. And here's the cosmic joke. Once you stop expecting people to care, you start learning how to care for yourself. Silence, it turns out, isn't just peaceful, it's merciful. It spares you from the disappointment of being half heard and half helped by people who are already drowning in their own invisible noise. So next time you catch yourself about to emotionally vomit on a well-meaning neighbor in aisle 4 of the supermarket, pause. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your breakdown, especially when they're just there for bananas. Part 3. You're pouring your pain into a cup that's already cracked. Picture this. You're holding a delicate teacup. A bit chipped hairline cracks around the rim. You've been carrying this cup for years. Now imagine trying to pour your deepest pain into it. What happens? It leaks. It spills. It burns your hands. And worst of all, it was never built to hold that kind of weight. That's what happens when you tell the wrong person your problems. You think you're sharing. They think you're dumping. You're crying. They're texting. Here's the spiritual translation. You're pouring sacred grief into cracked containers. Not every friend is your healer. Not every family member is emotionally literate. And let's be honest, some people only listen so they can reuse your pain as gossip at next Thursday's mahjong game. Elderly psychology has a name for this emotional misattunement. It's when the people you confide in can't reflect back the depth of what you've shared, not because they're evil, but because they're limited. Maybe they never learned how to hold pain. Maybe they're secretly relieved it's happening to you and not them. Maybe they're just thinking about pie. And the worst part, when you get no comfort in return, you feel twice as broken, once from the original pain and again from the silence that followed. Buddhism reminds us to be mindful, not just of what we speak, but where we place our words. A seed grows not in every soil. So why do we keep handing out our suffering like coupons at a garage sale? Because we confuse venting with healing. But venting is like scratching a rash. It feels good for 5 seconds and then gets redder, louder, and harder to ignore. What if instead of bleeding out all over someone who can't stitch you up, you sat quietly with the pain? Let it whisper its wisdom. Let it teach you how strong you are when there's no applause. You're not broken for feeling pain, but you might be breaking yourself further by giving it to the wrong hands. So protect your story, not out of shame, but reverence, because the right person won't just hold your pain. They'll know how to hold you too. Part 4. Talking makes the problem bigger. Silence shrinks. It back to size. Have you ever noticed how the more you talk about a problem, the bigger and uglier it becomes? You start with, "My knees hurt," and 5 minutes later, you've convinced yourself you're dying of some unnamed joint apocalypse that no doctor can cure, except maybe a shaman in New Mexico. This isn't just you being dramatic, it's neuroscience. Every time you replay a problem out loud to your cousin, your neighbor, the cat, your brain reinforces the fear circuits. It's called rumination, and it's the psychological equivalent of microwaving the same leftover grief until it mutates. But Buddhism. Oh, Buddhism clocked this centuries ago. Whatever you feed grows. Whatever you release dissolves. When you narrate your suffering over and over, you're not healing. You're hosting a talk show where pain is the guest star every episode. Now here's the kicker. Most of us confuse speaking with solving. But if talking fixed everything, we'd all be enlightened by now, and your Uncle Bob would be Buddha himself. Instead, silence gives your mind space to breathe, to shrink the monster back to size to see clearly. In meditation, monks don't process their pain through words. They sit, they breathe, they let it pass like weather. Elderly psychology says the same. Seniors who journal privately or meditate instead of constantly verbalizing report higher resilience and faster emotional recovery. Why? Because silence breaks the feedback loop. And here's where it gets dark in a funny way. Sometimes when you keep talking about your problem, it starts to feel like your pet. You feed it. You name it. You take it for walks. God forbid someone tries to take it away. Now you're defensive. You don't understand my arthritis. Grief chihuahua. Silence starves that creature. It says, you are real, but you don't run the show. So the next time you feel the urge to rehearse your disaster one more time over lunch, try this instead. Chew slowly. Smile mysteriously. And let people wonder why you're at peace when you could be falling apart. That, my friend, is power. And it says more than words ever could. Part 5. People don't know what you need, and they'll mess you up trying. There's a funny thing that happens when you tell people your problems. They immediately try to fix you, like you're a leaky faucet or a remote control that just needs fresh batteries and a pep talk. But here's the brutal truth. Most people have no clue what you actually need. And worse, they'll project their own fears, traumas, and motivational poster wisdom all over your very personal pain. You say, I'm feeling lost. They say, try yoga. You say, I'm grieving. They say, everything happens for a reason. You say, I feel broken. They say, have you tried chia seeds? It's like showing up to the emergency room with a stab wound and someone offers you a scented candle and a podcast link. Here's why when people hear you're suffering, they get uncomfortable. Not because they're heartless, but because your pain touches something unresolved in them. So they try to soothe you in ways that make them feel better, not you. This is what Buddhism refers to as diluted compassion, the kind that comes from ego, not presence. To help without knowing is to harm with good intentions. Elderly psychology shows that adult children often respond to aging parents' emotional disclosures with unhelpful solutions because they're afraid of mortality, yours and theirs. So they offer tech fixes, vitamins, or Facebook videos of smiling old people doing Pilates. But what if what you really needed was silent space to feel, to grieve, to sit with your sadness, like it was an old friend who just dropped by unannounced? When we speak our wounds to the wrong ears, we risk getting patched up with duct tape and denial. A personal story. Marjorie, 79, told her daughter she felt deeply lonely after her husband died. Her daughter said, "You just need a hobby. Try watercolors." Marjorie said nothing. That night she wrote her grief into a notebook. Then she sat by the window. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't cry. She was finally alone, and finally heard by herself. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't being alone with your pain, it's letting someone else decorate it with their fears. So next time you're about to spill your heart to someone, pause and ask, is this person a witness or a fixer with a glue stick? Because not every helping hand is holding medicine. Some are just making the mess worse. Part 6. Stop narrating the fall. Start climbing out. There's a curious thing about falling. We spend more time talking about the fall than trying to stand up. I don't know how this happened. I've always been unlucky. It's just been one thing after another. And suddenly, you're not just in a hole, you're installing curtains and calling it home. We've all done it. But here's the real trap. When you keep narrating your collapse, you delay your recovery. Your words become bricks. Your story becomes a wall. And before long, you're trapped inside the castle of your own complaints, crowned king or queen of a kingdom made entirely of woe is me. Buddhism has a sharp but elegant warning. The more you describe the fire, the less time you have to escape it. Talking feels like action. That's the trick. It gives you a sense of movement when really you're just pacing in a circle in slippers. Elderly psychology calls this ruminative inertia. It's most common in older adults who experience loss retirement or chronic illness. The danger isn't the pain itself. It's the ritual of explaining the pain to others instead of finding new rhythms of life. Think of it this way. You're on a sinking boat. You can either yell, "We're sinking for 30 minutes, or you can grab a bucket. Now here's the darkly hilarious part. Some folks get so attached to their problems, they start to polish them. They say things like, "Well, I've just always had bad luck with men." Or, "This is just who I am now. Sad, tired, and watching game shows at 3 p.m. That's not an identity. That's a habit with good lighting." Here's a better option. Go silent, then go inward. Ask yourself, what's the next smallest action I can take that isn't just talking about this? Maybe it's stretching. Maybe it's taking a walk. Maybe it's deleting your cousin Janet from Facebook because she keeps posting fake medical advice. Whatever it is, make it a movement, not a monologue. Because your pain isn't a podcast, and you're not obligated to keep producing new episodes. Part 7. Silence isn't weakness. It's choosing your weapons carefully. Some people think silence means surrender. That if you're not shouting, posting, or explaining yourself with a PowerPoint presentation, you must be weak, or worse, guilty. But let me tell you something from the oldest trick in the monastery. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's not you giving up. It's you sitting in the tall grass, sharpening your internal sword, while everyone else is busy tweeting about their drama. There's a story from an old Buddhist temple, maybe myth, maybe memory, about a monk who took a vow of silence for 10 years. People mocked him, ignored him, even tried to provoke him, but he said nothing. Then one day, a thief broke into the temple and demanded the monk speak or face violence. The monk looked at him, calmly smiled, and pointed to the door. The thief ran. Not because the monk fought, but because stillness unnerves people who thrive on chaos. You want to confuse a manipulator. Go silent. You want to disarm a narcissist. Go quiet. You want to see who respects your boundaries. Say nothing and watch who keeps talking just to hear themselves. In Buddhism, silence isn't passive. It's called mana, a sacred practice of restraint. It's where you pull your energy inward, like a tortoise pulling its head back inside its shell. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The arrow not released is still deadly. Elderly psychology agrees. Seniors who practice emotional silence, not repression. Big difference tend to report greater emotional stability and lower blood pressure. Why? Because they're not constantly triggering their stress response, explaining themselves to people who don't deserve the story. Here's the darkly funny twist. When you stop reacting, people think you've leveled up. They call it mystery. They project strength, wisdom, maybe even spiritual awakening. But really, you just got tired of repeating yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. So go ahead, don't answer the phone. Don't reply to the passive-aggressive text. Let them wonder. Let them stew. Let them talk in circles. Meanwhile, you're sitting there, a silent monk in your recliner, armed with peace and peppermint tea. Part 8, Pity is a drug, and you'll OD before you notice. Here's something nobody wants to admit, especially not after 60. Pity feels good. Not like cake and grandkids good. More like scratching a mosquito bite until it bleeds good. It's a quick hit. Someone frowns, pats your hand, and says, "Oh, bless your heart." Your nervous system lights up like a Christmas tree. For a brief moment, you feel seen. But here's the thing about pity. It's a drug. And just like any drug, you build a tolerance. Soon, one tear. "Oh no, that's terrible," isn't enough. You start telling the story with more flair, more drama, more tremble in your voice. You become the tragic narrator of your own soap opera. Not healed, not helped, just hooked on being the main character in someone else's concerned gaze. Buddhism isn't subtle about this. Attachment to suffering is still attachment. The ego doesn't care if you're admired or pitied, it just wants attention. But the older you get, the more dangerous this game becomes. Because the audience gets bored. They stop showing up. And suddenly, you're alone in a theater playing the same sad film to no applause. Elderly psychology calls this secondary gain. It's the comfort we secretly get from being unwell sympathy, lowered expectations, people not asking us to help move the couch. But over time, it steals your independence and rots your resilience. Take Doris, age 75. She joined 3 grief support groups after her husband passed. At first it helped. Then it became a loop. Week after week, same story, same tears, same nods. 5 years later, she wasn't grieving anymore, she was performing. Healing never came. Why? Because she never stopped feeding the wound. Here's the dark comedy of it all. Pity will throw you a blanket, but it won't teach you how to walk again. Compassion uplifts. Pity anchors. And if you're not careful, you'll build a life around being the one who suffered and forget how to be the one who survived. So the next time you catch yourself chasing pity like a sugar fix, stop. Ask yourself, do I want comfort or do I want clarity? One keeps you stuck. The other gets you free. Part 9. Not telling people your problems is the most savage move of all. You want to know what really freaks people out. Going silent, not ghosting, not passive aggression. I'm talking about going fully, mysteriously monk mode quiet, especially when they expect you to overshare, cry, or collapse like last Tuesday. Because silence, that's power. The moment you stop explaining yourself, defending your misery, or inviting others into your emotional bathroom stall, you become terrifying. You become unpredictable. And in a world obsessed with control, that's the ultimate rebellion. Let me tell you what happens when you don't tell people your problems. Manipulators lose their grip. Nosy relatives get bored. Gossip dries up like overcooked chicken. And you finally get some damn peace. Here's why people expect you to narrate your downfall, so they can measure how to treat you with pity, superiority advice, or indifference. But when you go quiet, you rob them of the script. Now you control the narrative even when you say nothing at all. Buddhism calls this noble silence, and it's not just about zipping your lips. It's about choosing not to bleed out in public, about protecting your inner sanctuary like it's a monastery guarded by dragons. He who speaks less bleeds less. Elderly psychology backs this up too. Older adults who emotionally detach from approval culture show stronger cognitive health and sharper decision-making. Why? Because they're not busy scanning faces for feedback. They've outgrown the performance. They're playing chess while everyone else is still gossiping about checkers. Here's the savage twist. Once you stop telling people your problems, the same people who dismissed you will suddenly ask, "Are you okay?" and you'll smile. Not because everything's fine, but because you finally realized you don't owe anyone your insides. Silence is not just self-respect. It's a strategy. It's a flex. It's the grown-up version of walking away with your dignity and your peace intact. So don't post it. Don't text it. Don't turn your pain into a group activity. Let them wonder. Let them gossip. Let them fill in the blanks with their own projections. You've got better things to do. Like heal. Quietly. Like a boss. So here we are, full circle. You've sat through 9 brutally honest, slightly unhinged, spiritually charged reasons why telling people your problems might actually be the problem. And now, what? Now you get quiet. Not the awkward bite your tongue kind of quiet, but the sacred kind. The kind of silence that doesn't shrink you, it centers you. That doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop leaking. Because not every heartbreak needs an audience. Not every pain needs a press release. And not every storm in your soul needs to be narrated to the neighbor with the dead eyes and the expired sympathy. Buddhism calls it inner refuge. Psychology calls it self-regulation. And your wise old gut probably just calls it finally shutting up and breathing for once. This isn't exile. It's sanctuary. You're not choosing silence because you're weak or scared or bitter. You're choosing it because you've finally realized your energy is priceless and not everyone deserves a sip of it. So next time life punches you in the throat, try this pause. Feel. Say nothing. And in that stillness, listen, really listen. You might just hear the sound of your own strength. And that sound, it's loud enough to carry you through anything. No applause needed, just peace.